Stress, lack of confidence, and anxiety. These are just some words I hear over and over and over again in my coaching practice. Today I'm going to speak about how we can transform stress into effortless living. For the last 2.5 years, I've been coaching women to overcome really stressful ex-relationships. And having been through it myself, this is the conclusions I've come to. That when we stay in the stress, when we stay in the lack of confidence, and when we stay in the anxiety, and this now becomes our reality, it's usually because of one misunderstanding. The misunderstanding of actually where our feelings are coming from. I see a lot of women coping. Things like keeping busy just to avoid the emotions. At worst, they self-medicate. But at best, they treat the symptom, not the cause. I don't know about you, but for many, many years, I honestly thought that my lack of confidence, that my stress, and that my anxiety came from external factors, such as the horrible boss, the nasty ex, the computer that didn't work, the traffic, the pressures of life. Only to realize that the stress, the lack of confidence, and the anxiety was only ever coming from one place, and one place only. My thinking in the moment. So why should this even matter? And what are the implications of this understanding, or even deepening our understanding of where our feelings are actually coming from? Well, in short, I found that the stresses that I used to have started now to allow me to live a life somewhat more effortlessly. A deeper, fuller, richer, more connected experience of life. A life that invites us to really, truly see the magnificence of who we are. Now, if you're probably thinking that just having this understanding or deepening your understanding is going to happen overnight, that suddenly you'll start living an effortless life, what I want to point to is this. You'll spend less of your time in the stress, the anxiety, and the lack of confidence. You won't see it as your reality as much anymore. Now, the question, well, how does it work? How is it that an understanding of actually truly where our experience is pointing from can actually create that difference? Now, this is the question I definitely ask myself. It's definitely the question I get a lot from my clients. And usually I just answer, well, it just does. But for those that are more curious of you here, let me share an insight that I've had over this. When we truly can see that what's actually creating our reality is the principle of thought, but our thoughts are just illusory anyway, can we not just start to see that actually there are no problems? There are no monsters underneath our beds anymore. It's just all an illusion. Kind of an interesting point. But what to make of that? What to make of that when we are in the reality of it all? Well, what I've started to realize or find is actually when we kind of get all stressed and feel anxious and we don't want to speak up as women specifically, is just to notice that we're kind of feeling slightly uncomfortable, that we're kind of feeling a little bit anxious. Because what this is actually pointing to is that we're not seeing the situation for actually what it truly is. Here's the good news. The good news is this, that our innate state is one of peace and calm. That is actually how we're supposed to be most of the time. I don't know about you, but I see most of the time that not being the case. Now, a lot of my clients say to me, well, that's great, but I haven't felt peace and calm for years. So how does that work? Well, here's the other bit of good news. We have a self-correcting system. our mind is a self-correcting system. That's cool, huh? But then, how is it then that it doesn't really work all the time? How is it then we can spend all of that time in that stress? Well, simply because we've overridden it through our conditioning. I don't know about you, but I've seen kids, right? Little children that rush around. Sometimes they're really having a massive tantrum, and literally it's forgotten in 2 seconds and they're walking off and playing again. That's just an example of our self-correcting system working perfectly. But what are the implications on a grander scale when we look at what possibly could happen if each and every one of us could understand the deeper nature of thought? Well, personally for me, I believe that wars wouldn't happen because we could possibly see that the feelings of anger, resentment, and hurt weren't actually coming from the enemy, weren't actually coming from the terrorist, but actually from our thinking in the moment. Greed would dissolve. Why? Because actually when you really think about this, when you really consider that everything that's created is only an inside-out job, then money doesn't actually play a part in giving you any security, any happiness, any power. I'm sure you've met people who are very rich and are miserable. And I'm sure that you've met many poor people who are actually quite happy. And finally, playing a small game, not being able to step up or being heard. The difference that this is going to make, or that can make, is infinite. Because if women can actually understand that they're just buying into their illusory thinking about who they perceive they are, then surely there's a possibility that they can step out of that and move into a much more empowered place. Personally, for me, deepening my understanding of where my feelings are actually coming from has made a profound impact on my life, just even in the last 7 months. I don't know about you, but I used to be a bit of a searcher, searching for the next shiny penny, going from seminar to seminar to seminar, going from relationship to relationship to relationship, moving from country to country to country. The next best thing. I'll be happy when. Searching for the answers outside of me, making me feel more insecure because I would get more confused about everybody else's opinion. Only to realize that the joke had always been on me. Because in actual fact, I was the one with the answers. It had always been here. It hadn't gone anywhere. I was just looking in the wrong place. And what this has invited is an opportunity for me to truly acknowledge and listen and trust my innate wisdom. The wisdom that we have, each and every one of us inside of us. And as a result, it's dissolved a lot of that thinking that I used to have. Now, it didn't always used to be this way. Imagine 2006. I was going through a very, very painful divorce. And at the time, I didn't have the understanding that I do today. Back then, alcohol, cigarettes, and psychics were my way of dealing with it. I drank so much that I couldn't remember the day before. I smoked so much that my tongue went black. And I became so addicted to the idea or to the illusion that the psychics could actually give me something to make me feel calmer, just to hear them say that tomorrow was going to be better than today. In so doing, I must have spent about £5,000 in them alone. Every day, I honestly thought I'd hit rock bottom until I realized I hadn't, until I did. And I remember, I don't know about you, but there are days that I really remember really clearly in my head, you know, like as if they were yesterday. And this was one of those days. The pain got so bad in the moment that I decided to drag myself to hospital. So I thought, at least there they can give me something to numb the pain, right? So I sat myself down and I just thought, how did I get here again? You see, it wasn't the first time this had happened. 10 years previously, I thought that the best way out was with sleeping pills. Now, I don't know how many hours must have gone by, but I suddenly heard the doctor call me in. So I walked on in, sat myself down, and when I wasn't really ready for what he was just about to say, you see, I had admitted myself into hospital, which basically meant they were now responsible for me. So they needed to make sure that I was sane enough to leave. He basically said, you know, we can actually admit you into the psych ward, throw away the key. And I suddenly had images of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. And what really freaked me out was this. Nobody knew I was there. No family, no friends. And in all of this confusion and fear and self-doubt, I suddenly heard it. I heard the voice. The same voice I'd heard all those years ago. The voice that got me out of bed, that walked me down the stairs, got me to tell my friend what had happened, rushed me to the hospital to get my stomach pumped. And the voice said this, as it all dissolved, as clear as a bell, convince him that you're okay and then you can go. 20 minutes later, I left. But this is what I learned that day. That in order for us to have that clarity of mind sometimes, we've got to acknowledge that each and every one of us has this innate wisdom inside of us, guiding us from moment to moment. But is acknowledging enough? Is acknowledging enough for us to have an effortless life, one that we can live from our hearts, one where fear doesn't actually play much of a presence? And what I've realized is this, that actually acknowledging is fine, but what if we don't listen to it? How often have people got ill, or worse, got a disease because they didn't listen to their bodies? They just carried on and on and on. Listening is something that we can do, but yet how many of us actually do it properly? Now, I come from a Spanish family, and in my family, what usually happens is, the way we communicate is you've got to speak the loudest, so you can be heard. So listening didn't really come very naturally to me. But about in 2010, I got to see the power of this. I was meeting up with an ex of mine, and let's just say the relationship hadn't ended so great. And he had a few words to say. So I plucked up the courage to actually call him in, and we sat ourselves down, and we were having a great time, this and that and the other, and then suddenly out of nowhere, boom, he got triggered. And all of this anger started coming out, and out, and out. And I don't know about you, but when somebody's being angry at me, the first thing I want to do is defend myself. But instead, I heard the voice, and the voice said, listen. So I listened. And I listened, and I listened, and I listened. And what astounded me more than anything else was what happened next. All of that anxiety, that fear, just dissolved, and compassion came through. Because I started to listen beyond the words. And what I heard was a little boy that was so hungry to be heard, a little boy that was so hungry to be loved. And once he'd said what he needed to say, everything dissolved, we gave each other a hug, and we moved through. Listening. This is now what I do with my clients, and it's so powerful because you start to listen behind what they're saying. Now, acknowledging and listening to your own wisdom, is it enough? Well, I think there's one more thing. Trust. Trusting the process. I find myself in a very interesting situation right now. My husband and I are going off to Bali to live at the end of this year. And I could have acknowledged it. I could have listened to the wanting of doing this. but I may not have trusted it and decided not to do it. And I've always had a dream to take women to beautiful places around the world, for them to get in touch with their innate wisdom, for them to be able to get in touch with their hearts, so they can dissolve all this illusory fear and self-doubt. And what's been amazing to me is this. Once you stick your stake in the ground and you acknowledge and listen and trust your own heart of what's really true to you, providence moves through. It's amazing. We were told that our house could not be rented in the month of January. I decided not to buy into that belief system. And in so doing, this is what's happened. We now have a family coming in to rent the house for 2 years, which effectively is the amount of time we're going for. We're leaving on the 31st of December. Oh, they're moving in on the 1st of January. Isn't that interesting? But it's not only me. I've seen clients of mine recently, one of them left the job that she hated, only to start having opportunities coming at her left, right, and center. So what I want to leave you with is this. An invitation. An invitation to deepen your understanding of how life truly does work. An invitation for you to look deeper into the idea that thought is what creates everything. Once you really invite this idea in and you deepen your understanding of it, I promise you, it will allow you to listen, acknowledge, and trust your wisdom. Live from your heart. Jump into the unknown. Live it. Dance it with fervor. Because it's from this place that the magic happens. It is from this place that you can live life effortlessly. Thank you.